One thing that I might ask you, or it might be in a definition somewhere, is describing what happens when you rub two balloons against hair and then hang them on a string and allow them to touch. Well, if you remember in class we did this little demonstration, and what happened was when we took the two balloons after we rubbed them on someone's head and we tried to allow them to touch, what they would do is they would actually repel against each other. And that's because when we were rubbing the balloons against the hair, we were taking electrons from the hair and they were attaching to the balloon. Well, electrons have a negative charge. So you had two balloons that were charged the same, or they were both negative. And what happens when you have two of the same charges, they will repel each other. Another thing that I'm going to ask you is to compare and contrast metals, nonmetals, and metalloids. And what I might have you do is take, let's say, metals and nonmetals, and I'm going to say, list two differences between the two. Well, one thing that you could use is you could say that metals are very shiny, and in science, instead of shiny, we use the word luster. So metals have a very high luster. Nonmetals, on the other hand, do not have a very high luster. They're not shiny, they're dull. So you could use that as one. Another one would be metals are great conductors of heat. They're able to withstand a very high temperature. So metals have a very high melting point. Nonmetals, on the other hand, do not have a very high melting point. They cannot withstand heat as well. And then finally, I'm going to say, list one property of a metalloid. If you remember from class, metalloids are kind of the in-between. So one thing that you might say is metalloids are good conductors of heat, not as good as metals, but definitely better than nonmetals. Another thing that you might want to say would be metalloids have an okay luster. They're kind of shiny, not as shiny as metals, but definitely more shinier than nonmetals.